Welcome everybody to today's webinar, Patients as Research Collaborators. Please note that all attendees are in listen-only mode and that this webinar is being recorded. I'm Lori Sjogren, Community Program and Services Director for the National Ataxia Foundation. And I'll be assisting with today's webinar along with our Communications Manager, Stephanie Lucas. Questions for today's webinar can be typed in the questions tab found in your control panel. We'll answer as many of those questions as time allows prior to the end time of today's webinar. So as your questions arise, please send those to us using that feature. And any unanswered or unrelated questions can be sent to naf@ataxia.org. I'm really excited to introduce the panel for today's webinar. Our panelists and research collaborators include David Brunnert, Julie Geye, and Sandy Reed. Dr. Pravin Khemani will be facilitating today's webinar. Dr. Khemani is a neurologist specializing in ataxia at the Swedish Neuroscience Institute Movement Disorder Center. Now I'll invite Dr. Khemani to start us off with today's discussion and further introduce our panelists. Welcome, Dr. Khemani and panelists.
Hear me okay? I think I was muted there for a second. Thank you, Lori. I'd like to start by thanking the National Ataxia Foundation and also our panelists here, Sandy, Julie, and Dave, for joining us on a Saturday. And most importantly, I'd like to extend gratitude to our audience who is tuning in from all over in these difficult times. I know we couldn't meet face-to-face at the convention, but I'm hoping through these informational webinars, we'd be able to achieve the objective of our National Ataxia meetings, which is to provide excellent clinical care to patients with ataxias and their families, and to move scientific inquiry of the cerebellar ataxias towards more effective treatments and cures. Over the next hour, I will be introducing our panelists and talking to them about their own experiences in the ataxia trials they're enrolled in, how they are how our panelists are research collaborators, and they're going to tell us about their own individual trials and tribulations, if you may, about taking part in the research studies they're enrolled in. Towards the end of the webinar, we have a Q&A session, so please stick around, write your questions down as they come to you and forward them to Lori, who will direct them to the panelists or myself, and we will do our best to answer your questions in the time that we have for this webinar, which is approximately an hour. And if we're not able to answer questions during the webinar, we will get back to you with answers afterwards. So with that, I'd like to address my first question to Sandy. I'd like her to introduce herself and tell us a little bit about how she got enrolled in the spinocerebellar ataxia trial that she's doing currently, and also tell us about other trials she might be doing or might have participated in the past. Thank you, Sandy.
Welcome. Hello, everyone. I'm Sandy Reed, and I'm very happy to be here today from the state of Washington. My diagnosis of SCA7 was made about 3 years ago, and since that time, I've participated in about 6 research studies for ataxia. 4 of them were very simple. I did an ataxia speech study at the University of Washington that only took about 45 minutes. And I've done a few cognitive online studies that measured brain response time for people with ataxia. That that was just done online at home, so that was pretty easy. The PROM study, that we just did recently, was just 3 questionnaires over 30 days. So that was, once again, very simple. I also gave a blood sample last year to GeneDx, and they're doing research that will help improve genetic testing. So I think that was simple, but it was definitely something that's needed. There's a lot of expense and and if they can maybe help genetic testing become more available to people, that would be great. The other two trials and studies I'm in are a little more complex. The Biohaven trial that I'm currently in is a 2-year commitment. It's about 20 visits, I believe, and I'm about 9 months in. And that is, you know, that, like I said, that's pretty easy and simple. The natural history study that I'm in at the National Institute of Health for SCA 7, and that's in Washington, D.C., and I go there once a year for a week-long study. That's probably the most intense. It goes everywhere from a small speech test to a pretty intense MRI. So that's probably the one that is the most consuming, I suppose you'd say. But being involved in all those research studies has given me a lot of hope and inspiration, and it's a very meaningful part of my life. And so anyway, that's why I'm happy to be here today, and I hope that we can share all of our experiences and we can help to answer your questions, and we can get more people on board to do research. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. Wow, you are a veteran. You've been involved in so many studies, a true collaborator, and we can all really learn from people like yourself. So, Sandy, as a follow-up question, how did you discover these trials, and where did you learn about these studies to be able to enroll in them?
Well, you know, they're really all different. The very first one, the natural history study that I began shortly after my diagnosis, my neurologist just kind of pointed me to them and just told me to contact them, and which I did. So that was via my neurologist. Since then, let's see, last year at the National Ataxia Conference in Las Vegas, I heard about the Biohaven trial, so that's how I got involved in that. I also, let's see, probably the CORDS registry, they contacted me for the GeneDx, as well as, I believe, the cognitive online studies. That was because I had registered with the CORDS. And then NAF contacted me for the PROM study. Let's see, what else? Oh, I know, the ataxia speech study that was locally here at the University of Washington. My support group, my local support group with NAF, our director just kind of put that out on Facebook to all of us that were on that group, and so they were able to get the 25 of us needed for that test. So yeah, so a lot of different ways.
Great. And so to summarize, you actually provided us a great sort of a tool. For those of us who have ataxia, you want to participate in the study, the National Ataxia Foundation, please register with them. The CORDS registry, that is another resource for research trials, so everybody needs to be in the CORDS registry, and the local support groups where you are another repository of information. And finally, the physician or the specialist that you're seeing is another source of information, but it's difficult for one provider to keep track of all of these studies. So those three resources seem to be invaluable for getting enrolled. Thank you, Sandy. Next, I'll go to Julie. And Julie, please tell us about yourself and the study that you're enrolled in and how you came to be enrolled in that particular study. Thank you.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name's Julie Geye. I live in Denver, Colorado, and I am currently enrolled in 2 studies. One is the ReadySCA study, and that's for SCA3, which is what I have. And the other study is another Biohaven that's for the Perulazole drug. And I became enrolled when I've attended the conferences and found out about the Ready SCA through that. And then the Trulazole, I'm trying to remember, I believe it was when it was first came out, there was my neurologist contacted me and asked to try to get me enrolled in the first go round of the study, and it filled up pretty quickly. And just a few months ago, because like I said, I just started the Trulazole study in January, and probably in December after my Ready SCA visit was when they said it was opening back up and that I would probably be a good candidate for that one. So that's how I got involved in this one.
Thank you, Julie. Follow-up question to you, Julie. You got your information, seems primarily from the National Ataxia Foundation. And how about the courts registry? And are you also involved in your local spinocerebellar ataxia support group where you live? And is that a good source of information for you as well?
It is. I have been attending my support group here locally. We meet 4 times a year. And I am enrolled in the CORDS registry. I enrolled, I believe not for in Philadelphia. At the conference in Philadelphia is when I enrolled in the CORDS registry. And like I said, going on you can go find lots of what the drug trials are through, sorry, I can't remember the name of the site off the top of my head.
All right, thank you. That's very informative. Next, I'd like to go to Dave. Dave, tell us about your background, where you're from, the study that you're doing briefly, and how you came to find it. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Dr. Khemani. I'm Dave Brunnert. I live in the Houston, Texas area, and I'm participating in the Ready SCA study. And for those of you that don't know, Ready SCA is one of those fancy names that refers to Readiness for SCA Clinical Trials. So I got involved because I come from a family that has SCA3, and I've grown up with the various family members, grandma, aunts, uncles, parent, my father, and then siblings that had gotten SCA symptomatic, and there was always this thing where there was nothing you could do about it. So when I found out about the clinical trial and that I could participate even though I wasn't symptomatic, I kind of jumped at the chance because it's very meaningful to me to be able to have an impact and to be able to help researchers learn more. So that's kind of how I got involved. How I found out about it, I look at a variety of sources. I'm a little bit like Sandy in that I'm in constant contact with the NAF. I'm actively involved in a local support group. But I look on the website. There's clinicaltrials.gov that always has various trials, and it can get pretty specific. So if you put in your specific type of ataxia, it can be pretty fruitful, pretty quick. So that's kind of how I found out about it.
Great, thank you. So it's interesting, Dave, if I understand correctly, your family is affected by spinocerebellar ataxia. Do you think you're affected by spinocerebellar ataxia, or do you think you're an asymptomatic participant because the Ready SCA also lets asymptomatic family members participate in the trial?
Sure. The Ready SCA allows asymptomatic patients to participate. I will say that as part of my participation, they did do a diagnosis, and I found out about this time last year that I was asymptomatic. So that was certainly a big day for me. And my brother, who's just a couple years younger than me, he started participation at the same time, and he is symptomatic, and he found out, he got a confirmation that indeed he does have SCA3.
So as a follow-up, Dave, And what is the utility of having asymptomatic participants continue in Ready SCA?
Sure. So disclaimer, I'm not a scientist, but my understanding is, so I am only 4 years older than my brother. And so by doing these blood samples and these MRIs and comparing directly his outcomes to my outcome, they get a pretty good offset. There might be something freaky in my brother's blood, but it might also be in my blood. So it could just be something that's familial, that's not related to SCA. And I think that's the scientific usefulness.
Very good. Thanks for sharing that. And indeed, that is true. The ataxia experts are interested in both people who are affected and symptomatic as well as asymptomatic to determine what's different, how does one person get the gene and how does the other person not? Are there propensities? So I'm thrilled that you continue to be part of the Ready SCA, and thank you for sharing the fourth resource, which is clinicaltrials.gov. So we got the National Ataxia Foundation, we got the courts registry, you got your local support group, and now we have clinicaltrials.gov. Those are 4 avenues to find out what studies are going on in the world of spinocerebellar ataxia. We'll continue this round of questions. We'll back to Dave. Dave, tell us about your experiences with respect to travel. I know about Ready SCA, it involves traveling from one site to the other. Any other experiences you could share with the panelists, with myself, with the audience that could make us better research participants?
Sure. So there's 4 things required that they do as part of the Ready SCA study. The first is they do a blood draw. The second, they do a draw of spinal fluid. The third is they do a SARA rating. And for those of you that may not know, SARA is the scale for assessment and rating of ataxia. And SARA test might be touch your nose, simple motor skills, simple walking with one foot in front of the other. So those sort of things get done, but they're done in detail and they're done on video. And the idea is you don't want one researcher grading one way and one researcher grading the other way, and that's why they videoed you doing the SARA test. And then the last thing is an MRI. And the MRI is probably, for me, that's probably the most, if you want to call it invasive component, that's maybe the hardest thing for me, but even that's not too cumbersome. So, but the MRI is a special MRI, so it can't be done at a local clinic. There's only a few very specialized MRIs around the country. I know one of them's at the University of Minnesota. That's where I go. They have a very special imaging center, and the people there are wonderful. They're so nice, and in fact, the Ready SCA trial helps me get there. So they cover my airfare, and they cover my hotel to get there, and the hotel is like right down the road on campus from the imaging center. So it's all pretty easy, but the travel and getting to the MRI and doing the MRI is probably the hardest part. The other part I just do locally at Houston Methodist Hospital, where I'm fortunate to work direct with Dr. Ashizawa and his team. So.
Thank you for sharing that. There's the travel component is probably the one that requires most amount of time and scheduling, but it's great that the sponsors are paying for your airfare and travel arrangements, which is typically what's done when you are enrolling patients from distant sites and there's only the apparatus to do some measurements are present only at certain sites. That makes sense. What about trials and tribulations, pros and cons? Anything else that you've experienced that you may do differently or have advice for the panelists, myself, and the audience, positives, negatives?
I would say trials and tribulations are just like any normal visit to the doctor. It's if any of you are familiar with the Houston Medical Center, it's a big place, and it's finding the parking spot, it's navigating traffic to get there. but once you're there, it's like executive level treatment, because it's not like there's 50 patients lined up. It's a pretty small select study, and so they're glad to see you. It's very personal, and then beyond that, it's just the normal needle stick. You know, you got to do that, but that's no big deal. But it's very personal. I can't emphasize enough how all the researchers have been tremendously just warm and personal, and you end up developing almost personal relationships with them. It's nice.
Thank you. And if I heard correctly, you also do a spinal tap once in a while. There are some studies that involve spinal taps, and there is a lot of misinformation about them. And I was kind of wondering if you could share your experience about the spinal tap part of the ReadySCA study.
Yeah, for those that have never done one, it's just about basically sitting up on a doctor's table. You lean a little bit forward just to sort of arch your spine a little bit to create a little gap, and the doctor just inserts a needle and draws some fluid. That sounds, I know, horrific to some people. I just kind of interpret it as another shot, and it was no big deal. The only side effect that I know of people getting, they get headaches, but I didn't even get a headache. I just, got to chill out there for 20 minutes and relax after it, and that was that was really no big deal.
Good. So next time there is a study involving spinal tap, I'll be recruiting Dave to be our.
Okay.
Okay, next, Sandy, you talked to us about the Biohaven trial, and I know that you're at the site where I am, and when I am one of the investigators. But can you tell us about the inclusion-exclusion criteria? I know we had talked about this briefly, and if it affected you in any way, and anything else you can share about the Biohaven trial thus far.
Okay. I think basically I agree with Dave when he says that everybody involved in all of these studies they've all been so kind and so welcoming that you never feel anxious or about going. I never have. I've always felt very welcome. As far as the inclusion goes, I had my confirmed diagnosis of SCA7, so I think that piece of it was easy, because some folks don't have their confirmed diagnosis. And I also have heard people say, why should I get a confirmed diagnosis if I already know, like in Dave's case where it's in my family, I already know that's what I have. But I think it's important because it is kind of a, I don't want to say an easy into these studies, but if you're confirmed with it, then there are 3 studies I've done that if I didn't have that confirmation, it would have been a little more drawn out, or perhaps I wouldn't have been invited to that study. So that's important. I think the other part of inclusion, I needed to obviously be willing to and committed to those couple of years, and also I was able to I think I forgot what it is, walk, I have written down here somewhere, be able to walk a certain distance without assistance, which I was able to do, 8 meters it says. And I'm also, my vision, my hearing, and speech were adequate enough to be able to, do all the questionnaires and answer all the questions, as well as do everything else. So as far as exclusion goes, I'm not, the one thing I've committed to is that I will not be on another drug trial. You obviously will mess up the drug trial you're on if you go on another drug trial. So that's a piece of it. I think the other part of the exclusion is, let's see, probably I don't know. I don't think there's many other things. As far as like PT and exercise, some folks have asked about that before. I still do my exercise and my physical therapy without, I haven't told anybody or signed anything saying I wouldn't do anything like that. So that was important to me that I was still able to do all those things. So yeah.
Good to know. So overall, it's not interfered much in your day-to-day life and in your general health care, would you say, the Biohaven trial, Sandy?
No, I mean, I haven't seen anything, like I said, other than, whether or not I can do another drug trial, which I haven't thought about doing at this point. So that hasn't been a problem. It hasn't interfered with my, I talked, before I started last year, I talked to my doctors at the National Institute of Health and made sure that I was still, it was okay for me to do that and be part of the natural history study, and they are anxious to know whether or not I was on Terizerol. I can't say it as well as Julie, but the drug that I'm on. But they are anxious to know whether or not I was on it or not as part of their study, so they can perhaps put that into their research. So.
Got it. Yes, that's an important point. Being part of one drug trial usually excludes you from being part of another drug trial for good reason. You don't want anything to influence either trial. And when you're taking drug or placebo, you don't know which one you're getting.
Right.
So that's sort of baked into the trial process. It's also good to know that you're able to do your exercises, which is important, because that could be a deterrent to people to participate in a trial. And since we are still recruiting for the Biohaven troriluzole trial, it's going to be a while before we finish our recruitment phase, and I am hoping in the next several weeks, when the blind is broken, you will know whether you were taking the medication or the placebo, and that's when you can discuss that with the ReadySCA collaborators, and I think they're aware of that. Next, I'll go to Julie. Julie, if I understand correctly, you are in the same trial as Sandy, but in a different location. But we'd love to hear about your personal experiences in this trial thus far. Any risks, benefits, and anything at all that you'd like to share with the panelists and the audience, please.
Sure, of course. Like I said, I'm in the same trial as Sandy in the troriluzole, sorry. I just started in January, and when I heard about it and became interested in it was in December of this past year. And at that time, I was not formally diagnosed with SCA3. However, my father had it, passed away. His two siblings had it and passed away. My sister was a confirmed diagnosis. So actually part of my blood draw for the pre-screening was to get my formal diagnosis. So that's how I got my formal diagnosis, because I knew I had it. I had some of the symptoms that my father had and my sister had. So, I mean, that was kind of nice to finally get a confirmed diagnosis as I move forward with this trial and hopefully other trials in the future. I know it's kind of scary for some people to actually know if they actually have an SCA ataxia disease, and they don't want to get that confirmed diagnosis, but I feel that it's necessary. And being part of this drug trial and my participating in it, what I'm experiencing in these past few months, I write everything down, whether it's significant or not. I feel that it will help my doctors, and when they submit everything off to the lab or whoever is to Biohaven, I guess, because I don't know if I'm getting the placebo or the actual drug. And so each time I go for my visit, We kind of run through how my past month has gone, what have I experienced, and I feel that writing everything down is very beneficial for that research. Let's see, what else? Yeah, I think that's
that's a great summary. Thank you. Has being part of this research trial interfered in any way in your schedule, your general health care, your work, the time you spend with family? Can you share some of that with us, please?
Sure. It has not interfered with anything. I actually work for a healthcare company, and I just kind of talked to my boss to tell her, hey, I'm participating in a clinical trial, and for the first 3 to 4 months, I'll have to go to these doctor visits, and I'd be gone for half a day, but they're so family oriented, and especially in this time right now where we're all working from home, they understand, and usually our health is their first priority. So they're very supportive of what I was doing, and family time has not interfered with that at all either.
So Julie, what do you say to those people who say, listen, just give me the treatment. I don't want this placebo thing. I just want the drug, and I don't want to be part of this randomized placebo control where I don't know if I'm getting the treatment or not. And, you know, it's a very valid observation. And how did you navigate that?
Yeah, I agree. Most people, like, even for me, I'm like, oh, I hope I'm getting the drug. But if I'm not, even though I might not be getting the drug, I don't know, but at least what I'm experiencing with the placebo and or drug, writing it down and providing that information, I believe is good for the research, whether it's what I have been experiencing or not. So it's kind of like whether it's good or it's bad, you know, they need to have a reference point. Meaning, let's say you are taking the placebo and you don't see any effects, and then I believe next year, I started in January, so I believe in January I'll definitely be getting the drug, and then they can be like, oh, well, this is how things have changed since, you know, last year you had hardly any experiences or any issues, and now, hey, maybe the first month of this new drug, you might see an increase of this, that from what other people have seen.
Yes, thank you. That's great. To paraphrase Albert Einstein, if we knew the outcome, it wouldn't be research. So, you know, we cannot presuppose that any compound that is being studied is automatically effective. In fact, that's what we're trying to do in trials like the Biohaven and troriluzole trial. So thank you for being part of it. Now, it's the obvious question, which I really have been waiting a while to ask, and I'll turn to Sandy for that. How has COVID-19 affected your participation in the Biohaven trial? And I'll go around and ask the same question to the other panelists as well.
Okay, well, you know, I'm currently 9 months into the trial, and it's basically on hold from what I understand, other than we're still doing our meeting. I just met with Dr. Khemani last month, as well as the research coordinator. We had our little Zoom chats, and I answered all the questions. My medication will continue, be sent by mail, and I went locally to get my blood done to make sure everything was all good there, as you know, as they check that. And so really it hasn't, you know, other than the fact that you know, it's like everything else, everything's just sort of being put on hold, and hopefully for not too long, but we'll see how that all works out. But other than that, it hasn't affected the trial or anything.
Thank you. So to be specific, other than the examination component, which is the SARA and the physical and the neurological examination, we were able to do a lot of those rating scales, those historical rating scales, remotely through the online platform. And if I remember correctly, we did a little bit of the exam, you and I, as well online. It's not as perfect as an exam in person.
Right.
So how were your experiences doing the online scales with myself and the coordinator? Did that go smoothly for you?
Well, you know, that was truly my first time I'd ever done anything on as far as like Zoom or anything like that online. That really was. I mean, I'm kind of a low tech kind of gal, and you know, I always tell people that I was 39 years old when I sat in front of my very first computer. So, so other than that, I mean, Dr. Khemani and I, we you know, just even the nose, like, okay, where is Dr. Khemani's finger? Oh, it's over there, you know, that kind of thing. But we, you know, there were some things I was able to set my iPad up and he could see me walk, and so yeah, it was nice. And then Jennifer and I, the coordinator, we were able to do the entire questionnaire that she normally just sits there in the office with me and we do. So I was able to do all that. So that turned out good. And then like Julie had said, I always write down things over the past month so that I can convey that at my appointment. And so I was able to just, you know, read through that. And so I think that I also want to say, getting away from the virus, I also want to say that part of the all the questions, and people need to understand that that's an important part of being in the trials, is being honest and being ready to share all those things. You can't just, oh yeah, just forget, I'm not going to tell them that I did this or that, or, you know, it's important to be honest in these trials. So that's yeah.
Thank you. And I think that we really need to thank you and everyone else in this trial and other trials who are allowing us to maintain continuity, because continuity in research studies as well as clinical medicine is very important to ensure that we are performing them with a high degree of fidelity, COVID or no COVID. And I think you could have fooled me. You're not low tech at all. Your camera work is exemplary.
Thank you.
So even I was learning, you know, how to navigate. So I think we're all in this together, and we are all learning on how to do this effectively online. So thank you for that. And I'll turn next to Julie with the same question. Julie, can you share with us your experiences, if any, during COVID-19, and if COVID-19 has impacted or affected your enrollment or continued participation in your trial, please?
Sure, of course. Like I said, I just started mine, so I've only been to the hospital 3 times, and then this 4th time we did a Zoom call. And the Zoom call, we just did the questionnaire. We didn't try to do any of the SARA testing. And then, of course, for the blood test, I had to go. They sent the prescription in, and I went to the hospital and just had that pulled. That was very simple to do. Go in, go to the lab, they pulled the blood, they came back home. And again, same with Sandy, they also mailed me my drug prescription as well, which went very simple. So as I'm still new into the trial, it hasn't really even been any disruptive or other than I can't really do my SARA test. We run through in the beginning, you know, what have I experienced the past month? We go through the basic questionnaire. I signed it, you know, I think they emailed it to me. I just confirmed back that, hey, I approved of what I went through in the questionnaire, and that's all that I could have done on this last trial, so, or my last visit.
Have you done any online visits in your research study where you are, Julie? And if you have, how did they go?
No, this has been my first one, so So far, what happened, the Zoom call that I had just a few weeks ago went very well. No issues there at all. So with this great technology that we have, thank goodness, we kind of did the best of what we could since I couldn't be there in person.
Thank you. And lastly, to Dave. Dave, your study may or may not be impacted by COVID-19 because different people are enrolled at different stages, just like Sandy is in a different stage in the same trial as Julie is. But share with us general observations if indeed it's been impacted, and if it's not, any general observations about what's going on with COVID-19 and research in your area, please.
Sure. Well, my annual cycle for my my office visit and my MRI is October-ish, and so I did one this past October. I'm not due until this next October, so it'll probably be a broader effect because of the fall resurgence that they keep talking about of COVID-19. I'll probably know more then. So, but right now I've been unaffected, but I'm certain there's other people like Julie that may be on a different cycle and it would be problematic. I don't think the local doctor's visit would be as impactful as there's all the associated travel with getting to the MRI, and that I'd be curious if there certainly they would probably dispense some extra advice around, you know, taking precautions, you know, in the airport and at the hotels and different things like that. But even I suspect any of us, the next time we go to a major medical center, we're just going to have there's just going to be a slightly different look and feel. There's going to be an attentiveness to transmittable disease that maybe was a little bit more obscure in the past. And so I think we'll see a lot more hand sanitizer. We'll see a lot more of those kind of things going forward. Probably it's more likely that we'll see one or more clinicians that might be wearing a mask, even though this is an ataxia study, not a transmittable disease study. But you know, we can't afford our doctors and nurses to be getting sick at this point. So that's suspicion on my part again. But it'll be very interesting to see what happens when I go in October.
Thank you. Yes, we cannot afford anybody to fall ill, doctors, nurses, coordinators, patients, etc. So we will be observing universal precautions. Dave, have you had any online visits specific to the Ready Sky yet with your investigators in Houston?
No, I have not. I've had some phone calls just to reconfirm some information, but that's it.
And if I remember correctly, is it just an annual visit for Sarah and physical exam and neurological exam with Ready Ska?
That's right. So,
great.
Yeah, just
go ahead. Okay, got it. Okay, well, in the next 2, 3, 4 minutes, we will do another quick roundtable before we open it up to question answers. And the topic of today's webinar is patients as research collaborators. And we've gleaned so much important information from each of our panelists, but I'd like to go back again to see if our panelists have additional thoughts on how patients can be more effective research collaborators. As far as I know, patients have been effective research collaborators since the advent of human subject research. So to me, it's a moot point, but I suppose what we're trying to get out of over here is how can patients be more active stakeholders in the research they are participating, and in any other thoughts they might have for research in the future. For that, I will go to, let's start with Sandy.
So I have to say that one thing that I did about 3 years ago when I was diagnosed was it was something that I became very passionate about. I didn't want to take that I'm helpless and hopeless and there's no cure and too bad for me. I was not only in this because my family has a chance and whatever I can do for them, it's really about what I can do just for the whole thing. And so even the small small steps, the small tests, even the speech therapy or the speech ataxia test. The gal that did it was just for her. She's doing a thesis. She's a senior at University of Washington this year, and it was her project. And it was, and even if on that small scale of that groundwork, and I have to tell you that even she was even able to give me tips about speech and ataxia that I would never have gotten had I not have spent that 45-minute test that are going to help me in the long run, but that are, and that's, I find that over all of my tests and all the folks that I visit, that they're all sharing little tips, little pieces of what I can do from, you know, my eyesight, my speech, my physical therapy, every piece of it, I get little advice and little tips. Dr. Khemani gave me a few little tips that have helped me, that have nothing to do with the trial, but they were great tips that have helped me to live a better life. I also want to probably tell people how empowering it is to feel like you're helping or you're doing something. It makes you have a little more exuberance to just get out there and do something rather than just sit back and do nothing, I guess. So good.
Thank you. Thank you for those kind words. It's interesting that a lot of the research study on research has shown that just by virtue of going to the investigator, who may or may not be your physician, on a regular basis, your general health improves because you get a lot of attention in research, which is a good outcome, I think. Next to Julie. Julie, can you tell us how you think patients, subjects, and families who may be affected with spinocerebellar ataxia can better collaborate with the scientists to move towards a cure for these diseases?
Of course. I just want to say that, I mean, even my father, who has passed away from that, and his two siblings have, there was really nothing to be done, even just like 5, 6, 7 years ago. There might have been new drugs up and coming, but I mean, now we have a drug that we're trying out. Who knows where we're going to be in the next 2 to 3 to 4 years from now with this. I mean, there's so many things going on right now that you can go on and take a look. I mean, I've been doing a lot of research, even online, that I'm like, oh, I want to try that coming up, you know? So it's like, most people, it's like this, I feel that knowing that I have this disease, but I'm trying to be positive and know that there might not be a cure right now, but there might be something to slow it down. And whether I'm at the beginning stage or the end stage, or you are at the beginning stage or the end stage, being involved in any trial is going to be so beneficial to provide your feedback and your research.
Thank you very much, Julie. That was truly inspiring. I'm going to Dave last. Dave, your observations and experiences, suggestions and advice on how patients can better collaborate with investigators in ataxia research. Please share those with us.
Sure. Well, just to echo what Sandy and Julie have already said, it for the longest time, the whole space around ataxia had this umbrella of there's nothing you can do associated with it. And just as a research collaborator, just feeling that my shoulder is to the wheel, that I'm doing something to help, it's pretty impactful to me. So there are things that we can do. It does require us to lift up our phone and make a call or send an email to get involved. But it can be very rewarding and impactful to get involved.
Great, thank you, guys. I have learned a lot, and I'm sure as has our audience from your observations. Just to recap, I think this is, we are in a new era here where we are doing this webinar, this webinar instead of meeting face to face, but are still able to disseminate information and learn from each other. We've learned what are the best resources in taking part in research. You got NAF, you got the courts registry, clinicaltrials.gov, and then we've got our local ataxia chapters. We've learned the benefits of being part of research, whether you're symptomatic or an asymptomatic a family member, and it seems like all panelists think that research has somehow enhanced their life, either physically or emotionally. So with that, I think we have a few minutes, and I am going to hand it off to Lori to see if she has any questions from the audience.
Thank you, and thank you all for the information and experiences that you've shared. That's all very helpful information. We do have a couple of questions. First one's for David. There is a attendee that would like clarification on your diagnosis. Did you say that you were first diagnosed and asymptomatic, or not diagnosed and tested as a family member?
So originally I participated in the study. I was asymptomatic. So I was what they call in the line of fire. So my father had SCA3. And so since SCA3 is a dominantly inherited ataxia, so I had a 50% chance of getting it. And so because of that, there were some slots for asymptomatic patients. By asymptomatic means I wasn't having problems with speech, swallowing, or walking per se, but it was always in the back of my mind, of course. And so as part of the study, very similar to Julie, part of the blood test included a complete lab analysis, and Dr. Ashizawa was able to share with me that not only was I asymptomatic, it makes sense that I was asymptomatic because I don't have FCA3. So I did not get it. Did I answer that question correct?
I think so. Thanks, David. Our next question, we have a couple of similar questions that are relatively the same regarding age exclusion. A couple of attendees are over 60 and may have been excluded from the studies or trials that they were looking into, or they're wondering if they are indeed too old to participate in studies. So I'll leave it to any of you to open up on if you ran into any age exclusions or know about age exclusions or criteria in the studies or trials that you're participating in.
I can answer on an age exclusion that I am aware of. So I have two nephews that are symptomatic that wanted to participate, but they weren't, I think you had to be at least 22 years old to participate. So they weren't old enough to participate. I don't know about being too old.
Thank you.
And I can answer a question about that with the study that I'm in, the natural history study for SCA7. They take all ages as long as you're physically able to go through, because it's a week-long study, and it's a Monday through Friday of pretty intense stuff. And so they realize that there are some folks who just can't manage that type of activity. My mother is one. She would, I mean, with SCA7, she's going on almost 40 years since her 40 years since she began her symptoms, and she would just physically not be able to do any of those things. So she would not have been able to do that. As far as the Biohaven trial as well, she doesn't walk anymore by herself. She is almost blind at this point. So there's things that she wouldn't be able to do as far as be a participant. So, but I do have to tell you though that I guess I'm like my mother in the way that she's very proud of the fact that she has already signed all the paperwork to donate her brain so that someday when she passes away, her brain will be researched and it'll be part of ataxia research. So that's an important piece.
It's a wonderful gift, Sandy.
Absolutely.
Yep. Can I jump in? I had my sister or my uncle and my aunt who have passed away. Both my uncle did donate his brain tissue, and I believe my aunt donated some other tissue samples. So that was like 15 years ago. So I'm hoping that was extremely beneficial for now.
That's great.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
All I'll say is the age part is just one inclusion exclusion criteria, but there are many different trials, and each different trial has inclusion and exclusion criteria for people with pediatric ataxia. As I'm sure there are other research trials going on, such as the Friedreich's ataxia trial, that accepts children with ataxia, because children can also get ataxia. So let that not deter you from looking for a trial in which you can participate, because there are several going on there.
That's a great point. Another question that we have are any tips that you guys have for individuals living in rural areas that want to participate in research studies or clinical trials, but those clinical trials or research studies are happening in more populated areas?
Both my nephews that I referenced, they live in a rural area, and but for their age exclusion, I know the Ready Scott study was interested in getting them to Minneapolis and was willing to help them get there, whatever that meant. I would say don't take yourself off the list because you think that's going to be a problem. I think you'd be amazed at what the people at the Ready Scott study or other studies would be willing to do in order to help you get to the appropriate research center.
I agree, Dave's point is very important. Let that not deter you from inquiring about research studies, because sponsors often are able to get people to where they want to do research. That's important. We need large numbers of people to enroll. Recruitment becomes very important, and I don't think anyone should be left out by dearth of where they live, which is, now is the time to actually think about teleresearch, to get to people who live in rural areas, just like we are all getting together remotely, still able to share information. And I think we are living in exciting times. These are terrible times, but these are educational moments as well. And I'm hoping that our sponsors can learn from this and usher in an era of teleresearch where we would be able to do things remotely and get people involved in research where they weren't able to previously.
Any other thoughts on that? I think piggybacking off of that as well, we have some questions about genetic testing. Would those conducting research studies or clinical trials assist those that have not yet been able to get a diagnosis of a specific type of ataxia or ataxia in general? And is that specific type of ataxia required to register in the patient registry? Did anybody get genetic testing as a requirement of participation, or from the folks that were conducting the research study or clinical trial?
So I did. Go ahead, Julie.
When I did the Biohaven study, like I said, back in December, they took vials of blood, And one of them was to confirm my diagnosis, because that was one of the criteria to participate in the study, of course. So I went that route to get my official genetic testing done.
And I was able to get a test done as part of the Ready SCA. It's probably important to note that I could participate in the Ready SCA whether or not they shared the results with me. I chose to find out what my results were, but I could have just continued to participate without knowing what my results were. But I suspect I'm unaware of any trials that would enable somebody that has no idea of what type of ataxia they have. I don't know of any trials that would enable them to get a comprehensive genetic test that would tell them exactly which type of ataxia they have. I don't know.
For the Biohaven study, if I remember the first leg that we did, there were people who didn't have a diagnosis, and they had a family history, so we suspected they had a genetic disease, and so we were able to perform a diagnostic test of the ataxias that we were studying to identify whether they had a specific ataxia that allowed them to be part of that particular trial. So yes, you can get different requirements. A full comprehensive panel may not be available, but you may get tested for the particular conditions that the trial is studying, and the Biohaven troriluzole trial allows us to do that.
Great point. I think that's all the questions that we have time for today. So want to thank our panelists again for all the information they've shared and all the attendees for those great questions. We certainly invite all the attendees to also become research collaborators as you are eligible and available. Please join the Courage Registry if you already haven't. And you can find registration for the Courage Registry on NAF's website. Also on NAF's website are the research studies that were talked about today and clinical trials that are talked about today that are recruiting, and check that page often as it is often updated. List again, and all of our attendees that joined us today. Enjoy the rest of your day and stay safe. Happy Easter, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.